Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimulamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion, and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jakadcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Areva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karva Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome back to our live streaming series here in Hawaii. We have recently returned from our mainland visit to the SRV ashrams in both San Francisco and Portland. Actually, in San Francisco there were no live streaming classes because we did a summer retreat on the American River, and all of us dived deep into the hymn Bhaja Govindam by Shankara, and each took verses and memorized it and sang it together as a group every day. And we did more than just the original 6 verses by Shankara, but all the other, some 16 or 18 extra verses by the followers of Shankara, and dived into that and sang Bhaja Govindam every day, and then had charts and teachings about the verses and what they meant and what their implications were. And then we went up to Portland and we had our conclusion of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which some of you probably were on hand watching or can look back on when this gets put on YouTube, because all of these classes and these series, they get put on YouTube eventually, and you can go back and peruse those teachings and contemplate them. It's a very high level of expectation that we follow here in Vedanta when we're aspirants of Indian philosophy and religion and truth, so what we call Sanatana Dharma, because there's a lot of Sanskrit involved, there's a lot of deep contemplation involved. As you know, all of you who have been following me or any of the other spiritual paths of India, that there are many, many echelons of wisdom. in the Dharma. So you have to qualify yourself and raise yourself up. If you're so fortunate as to have had a Indian Swami come to your country, as we did with Swami Vivekananda, and then his brother monks and some of their followers came after that over the last 2 or 3 generations, then you are given Vedantic principles, and those are ranging anywhere from non-duality, called Advaita, to Vishishtadvaita, which are these qualified teachings of the Dharma, which speak more in terms of sadhana, or practice, because the non-dual has to be realized. Many people make the mistake of hearing great sayings like, that thou art, tatomasi, or aham brahmasmi, this self is Brahman, and automatically think that that's the truth and that they've realized it. Well, it is the truth, but to realize it has to be followed up by spiritual disciplines. My teacher, who was a Swami from India, was always saying that. Affirmation is not enough, he quoted. You must need to follow it up with spiritual disciplines. So that proves the fact to you, and that's why I just chanted Vedanta, Siddhanta, Nirukti, Resha, and so forth. Vedanta, Siddhanta means the Siddhanta, the conclusion of the Vedanta, is that all is Brahman, time, space, living being, the world. It's all come expressing itself out of the word. And as it does that, it does it via the vehicle, you might say, or via the principle even of vibration. And that's why we are here today looking into a series of 5 classes on a strange Sanskrit word called Spanda, which means a vibration, or a foundation for a vibration. The Spandas of Shaivism are like the kingdoms of heaven within, and it's been an area of philosophy in India that I've accented. You might call it cosmology, but it definitely links into higher and higher, or deeper and deeper truths than just cosmology does. But you must know the cosmology, and when we say that in Sanskrit and in India, we mean the inner cosmology, not just the outer cosmology. As we've been making some siddhantas of our own in quantum physics and in astronomy and in other walks of life that are based only on examining outer principles and outer particles too. Particles of food, particles of matter, but all of these come from much subtler particles within, and those are vibrations that the senses can't approach. You see that there's, like the Upanishad states, that which the mind and speech try to approach but always fall back from, being unable to comprehend it, being unable to reach it. The one who realizes the truth of that Brahman overcomes fear and suffering for all time. And so it is. And the sloka ends, and so it is. You go beyond dualities and all forms of transformation. In fact, you go even beyond vibrations to the ultimate vibration, which was what Christ was trying to explain to John when he said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If you could understand that primal vibration, which in India is called Om, or AUM, and then you'll know from which all other vibrations came spilling out. And in that regard, this AUM, or sometimes you see it spelled as Om, but philosophically correct would be to spell it AUM, because the A would be the waking state, and the U would be the dreaming state, and M would be the deep sleep state. And it's just point of fact for people who have an inward orientation, or are developing an inward orientation, that having examined all the outer phenomena, is again why I just chanted Brahmanandam Paramasukadam, because that chant had in it that term Sakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena. So if you've witnessed all the outer phenomena, then you want to make a connection to where all of this came from. In other words, its origin. then you're going to want to examine the inner phenomena to find your way back to this source. And in that sense, you begin to examine consciousness itself. Consciousness must become conscious of itself, or awareness must become aware of itself. And that's what's not happening outside. We're aware of objects. We're a little less aware that the senses are bringing us the objects, and we're even less aware that the senses are connected to the mind, or even the brain, if you want to put it first. And so objects, senses, and brain all have a connection. We've studied that before in yoga. And in fact, you're supposed to meditate upon the 5 elements that make up the object. And you're supposed to then meditate on the 5 senses, which are apprehending the objects. And then you're supposed to meditate on your mind, and ego, and intelligence, and chitta, your thoughts. That's a 4-fold package. Antakarana, it's called the inner cause of things. So they named it very nicely. The mind is the cause of all this outward projection. And probably the easiest way for people to understand that is through the principle of vibration, even all the way out to quantum physics and so forth. When you're measuring things by microns, and then you shift and start to measure them by nanometers and so forth, you're getting to a very, very finer, tinier and finer particle and a very fine vibration. But again, it's beginning to disappear, and then your conclusion, your siddhanta, is based upon matter only. So if you were to watch the particles disappear inside of your thoughts, you would take, that is, the 5 elements apart from the object, and then instead of going towards examining the particles of matter, you would examine the origin of the object, would be in the senses. The senses are apprehending the object, and that's happening in waking state. And then you looked at your dreaming state, you'd find out that you're examining a whole other set of objects made of dream particles, thought particles, and then all of a sudden you would be at your dreaming state, and you would begin to have this inkling or this idea that maybe the waking and the dreaming are very much connected. We're looking at them as separate. And in the Upanishads it states that those beings who leave the A, the U, and the M separate wander about in the outer worlds of manifestation. They wander the 3 worlds, because A is outer world, and U is inner world, and M is transcendent world. Or A is your physical body, U is your subtle body, dream body, and M is your causal body, deep sleep, waking, dreaming, deep sleep. So these triputis, you see them all connected together with AUM of Om. And then you begin to make these connections, which are origins. The Sanskrit word is called utpatti. And they were very big, and are very big in India on pursuing origins. And they came to know very early that when you pursued them outwardly, they ended in matter. And there was no further out to go. You see, you've gone as far as out as you can possibly go if you're here. And that's why you suffer, because you're far away from the source. Pleasure is kind of suffering in India, remember. So whether you're having pleasure or pain or mixed here, which probably all of us are, then that's a kind of suffering that is peculiar or characteristic of the waking state, the outer state. You very seldom suffer in your dream state. I mean, even in a nightmare, you don't feel pain. You feel a kind of mental anguish, but you don't feel the physical pain, you see. So you are then making these conclusions, these siddhantas, that your dreaming state is a finer state made of final particles, and therefore a much more refined vibration. Well, that's what a spanda is, you see. And when I have been talking many times about those 2 particular quotes that Jesus made, he was said to have made. One of them was, the kingdom of heaven lies within you, and the other is, my Father's mansion has many chambers. And those are rather cryptic, and in the gospel and so forth, in the gospels, you'll find those referenced. But being rather cryptic statements, they don't explain the cosmology that Christ was inferring when he said that. He himself knew about them because he had worked his way down and out, so to speak, through these vibrational spheres from the Father, if you want to call the Father or the Almighty Father or the Spirit, or we would call it Brahman in India, or Shaivism would call it Paramashiva, Yahweh or Allah to the Muslims, whatever you want to call it, working its way out from that non-dual state into the realm of becoming. So there's being and then there's becoming. And as you course down that way or out, consciousness begins to move from station to station, then you have these various vibrational spheres which you will find some beings have stopped at. They haven't come all the way out to Earth. They've stopped in the realm of gods and goddesses, or they've stopped at the realm of celestials or angels, or they've stopped in the realm of the ancestors. And if they come down any further, then they're in the realm of humans, plants, and animals. And these would be a rough listing of Spandas, vibrational spheres. So you needn't become, in this series, you needn't become too confused by words like Spanda or Shaivism. Actually, as I just started off saying, when you come to Indian philosophy called darshana, that is, darshana means to clearly see. So anyone who comes to study the darshanas of India wants to clearly see the truth and all the connections leading to and from this world to beyond all worlds, to Paramashiva. So you would study these in your meditation, and you would study them in your birth, life, and death. That is, if you had conscious lifetimes, you may have, like Jesus, come out to the outer realm and taken on a form called a savior or an exemplar, or in India that word avatar, and then seen the condition of thinking consciousness here out in the world, and then tried to give those clues or those statements about inner worlds, and then abandon the form and move back to the Father, come one with the Father. I and my Father are one. And that's all a fairly, it's a sacrifice. We all take on a sacrifice when we take on a form. For whoso wears the form must wear the chain, Vivekananda said. But too true, he says, but far beyond both name and form is Atman, ever free. So that's our true nature, nameless and formless and uniform, indivisible. Akhanda Satchidananda means individual, indivisible, consciousness and knowledge and truth and bliss is a name for Brahman, or a name for reality. So when you're studying the darshanas that teach you the steps to return, then you're having to take account of the fact that many souls have made that outer journey and have made it an inward journey. It's just a matter of whether it has been forced upon them or whether they've done it of their own free will. In the case of the ancestors and the humans, it's being forced on them, and the force is called karma. And karma is bringing them back and forth from the realm of the animals, insects, plants, and humans. That's called the Bhuta Kasha. Bhuta means, well, it can mean anything from ghosts and spooks to physical beings. But taking that last definition as the main definition, it's the realm of physical beings. Your bodies, your objects that your senses are beholding and so forth in the waking state, Bhutakasha. And there are 4 other akashas that are interior to that. I can show you a chart on that in a week or two when we continue on with this series. So my point about this is that these darshanas have to be looked into, and if we looked into Shaivism in this next 5 classes, we would have plenty for that series of classes. And I'm going to concentrate on these Spandas. There are 36 of them, but in the oldest times, ancient times, when Lord Kapila presented this earliest version of the system that everyone else picked up on after that, there were 24. So that's why I put up these two charts, this old warhorse that we've used so much, called the 24 Cosmic Principles of Samkhya Yoga, that Lord Kapila put together so that we knew basically what these three worlds were made up of, in general speaking. I mean, you can go deeper into earth and call it metals and woods and everything, but he just says earth, and he says water, and then fire, and then air, then ether. If you know those 5 elements, then pretty much you know what the Bhutakasha consists of, and then you have to look into the various variegations, the combinations of these things. When the 5 objects combine, they make 5 elements combined, they make objects and so forth. So that's the Bhutakasha, and that's pretty much the realm of 5 senses and 5 objects, your active senses and the objects. And then also your cognitive senses connect there, seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling. Smelling to earth, and tasting to water, seeing to fire, feeling to air, and hearing to ether. See, those are direct connections. We call them connections because, again, if you keep the A and the U and the M separate, then people wonder about the worlds and they don't know where they came from or where they're going after death. So this is a predicament for a major percentage of people in the world. They come here into the body, they don't know where they came from, and they don't know where they're going to after they pass in the body. And that is, birth, life, and death is an accepted fact, but people run away from it or shy away from it. That's called Swarupanyata Bhava, a nice long Sanskrit word in Tantra, which means always shying away from your true self, always running away from the truth. You won't accept birth, life, and death. That's only half the problem. You won't accept your true nature that is birthless, lifeless, and deathless either. And that's the main problem, you see. If you knew your true self, then coming and going would be all nonsense to you. It would just be a play, it would be a dream, it would be a projection, it would be expression, it would be creation, preservation, and destruction, and you'd be the master of it. But since you shy away from knowing your true self, then all the particles disband. Everything gets separated, everything gets scattered. Pretty soon you've got Father of Yoga coming back and telling you, oh, I see, you have kshipta mind, scattered mind. And you, over there, you have mudda, dull mind. And you over there, you have vikshipta, sometimes scattered, sometimes dull mind. Oh, I see, there's a person over there who has a focused mind, ekagra, you see. Oh, and look at that great seer there, he's got niruddha, he's got no mind. See? So he starts talking to you about 5 kinds of mind that he sees in different embodied beings. And we know that if you talk to a person with ekagra mind or niruddha mind, focused or no mind, dissolved mind, one-pointed mind, focused mind, that they're telling you not about outer phenomena. They're always talking about inner phenomena. Why is that, you see? That you can go to all the people with scattered minds or dull minds or unfocused minds or focused on intellectual matters alone, and they're always talking about matter. And they're always talking about the problems of the mind, like psychologists. They're always talking about vibrating particles, like scientists. But no one's ever talking about inner phenomena, just outer phenomena only. And they're not tracing the source. Well, Indian philosophy traced the source, and it traced it again and again and again through millennia. And those are called darshanas, and the beings who did those grand inspections are called seers, rishis, if you want the rishi or rita, seers who know the truth. And they knew the inner truths because they had in their meditations and through many series of lifetimes, had inspected these realms which their consciousness moves through to get into the body. Now, consciousness moves through these realms in several ways. While it's still in the body, it moves through them by going from waking to dreaming to deep sleep and back. If you're an enlightened soul who knows the cosmology, then you can even go into samadhi beyond the three realms. Because that's steady, that never moves, that's stationary. Shall we? A 6-year-old boy set this up for us yesterday. We had him build an Om sign out of dominoes. This is an experiment that we have been conducting for a long time, just like this experiment. Remember the oil and the water, you see, and how they don't mix. But when you shake it, it will mix for about 45 seconds and then it'll separate. Well, that's one of the ways in which we teach the children how matter and consciousness seem to mix, but they're actually two separate things. One's insentient and one's sentient. So they'll have a relationship, but they won't stay together long. Case in point, birth, life, and death, as compared to embodiment and disembodiment. Well, in the same way, that's a nice experiment for that. The waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and what's beyond it is a good experiment with the dominoes. Now, waking state is the top part of this domino, A, and then dreaming would be the next section, and then deep sleep is out here in this little tail, you see. It sort of looks like a 3 with a tail. It's an Om sign in Sanskrit. Up here is what's called the Shvara, or the half moon with a dot. I sometimes call it one-eyed smile, you see, because that's where you get the bliss that you hear about in Indian philosophy. Is called Ananda. It's beyond the three worlds. So waking is one world, dreaming is another world, and deep sleep is the third world, and then the Shvara is beyond all worlds. So when you talk about what's beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that's called the fourth. Turiya was the name they gave it in Sanskrit. And so there were many fantastic names given to it. Asampragyata, Nirvikalpa, Nirvana. There were all sorts of names given to that state through the ages. But finally one seer said, screw that. It's too hard to remember for people. Let's just call it the fourth, you see. So 3 states of awareness plus the fourth. So when you get into the fourth state, it's transcendent of all these other states. And your consciousness, that's the origin of all things. It's the origin of all the Spandas, the 36 cosmic principles, or the 24 cosmic principles, or the kingdoms of heaven within, or the many mansions of the Father, many chambers in the Father's mansion. We're talking about the ultimate reality. So the experiment here, and I think I can reach over and do it myself, it's just to touch one of these, and you see, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are gone. But what didn't fall down? You see, what remains the same after everything else changes? That is, after your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep cycles are over, your consciousness has transcended those 3 movements. Because remember, consciousness doesn't move. It's stationary all the time. It's all pervasive. And that's why you would say, take the 5 elements and meditate on them. All right, earth, water, fire, air. I meditated on those. But when I got to ether, I meditated on ether, and I saw that it was undisplaceable. That it didn't take up, objects didn't take up any space, you see. That ether was undisplaceable no matter how many planets moved this way, or if I moved the couch from one end of the room to the other, the same ether would be there. Air might be displaced, but ether wouldn't. So all of a sudden you have this doorway into an inner ether. Now the word for ether in Sanskrit is akasha. And we just told you about the bhutakasha. That's the realm of the 5 elements and 5 senses, actually 10 senses. So you've got the bhutakasha, which is all outer vibration, all solidity. And you've got solidity and liquidity in water, and you've got radiance in fire, and you've got homogeneity in air and so forth, all pervasiveness in ether. So you begin to move your consciousness through these outer principles. It's called contemplation or rumination. It's not really meditation yet. That's supposed to be transcended. But you're actually taking stock of what you see. And a child putting together an experiment like that, or seeing an experiment like this, is actually now taking stock of what he sees. It's just a scientific experiment about oil and water. Let's get over it. We know what oil and water are. We've known it for a long time. But what does the experiment mean when you shake it and mix it up? And then, if you call one consciousness and the other matter, and you ask the child, do they mix? And he says yes, and then you put this there for about 45 seconds, you'll see the separation process take place. And then you have to tell the child, they mix for a little while, but ultimately they're two different things. And that would be the first part of a 2 or 3 part teaching that would be designed to show the child, or that soul that's in the child, that he is a soul and not a body. A soul with a capital S, by the way, not a soul that goes from heaven to earth to hell. That's another way of saying waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, isn't it, in a sense? You're in hell in waking state. No, I'm just kidding. So basically, you're getting beyond these dualities, and you're also using these triputis, these triple teachings, to make more sense out of the outer cosmology, see. And when you can make more sense out of the outer cosmology, and you know that matter and spirit ultimately won't mix, then you've got the realization of the seers, at least intellectually, or by way of words. And you'll be able to understand why they're in such a high blissful state. And you'll maybe be able to understand why the Shvara here stays in one place and doesn't move when waking, dreaming, and deep sleep get dissolved. And you'll know where your consciousness originated. It's a strange way of saying, because consciousness doesn't really have an origin. It is the origin of everything else. And it's immovable, all-pervasive, stationary, never free, never bound, birthless, deathless, timeless, formless, nameless. And we have another word for all of that. It's called Maya. In Maya, there is form, there is name, there is movement, there is time, there is space, and there is causality, karma, cause and effect. See? Just like I touched that and it went down, that's cause and effect. But the Shvara was left untouched. So when you're studying about a teaching like the 24 cosmic principles, tattvas they're called, or the Spandas, which Shaivism came along and added 12 more on top of the 24, then all of a sudden you have a system that's very well developed and which borrowed over time from other seers. That's one of the beauties of Indian philosophy, is that it's not just one saint or one seer or one savior or one avatar or one great book. It had dozens and hundreds of each through a long sweep of time. And now we get to look back on it and watch it and see it. We have all this dharmic information available to us now. And so part of my work here in the West in the last, since I began teaching Dharma, has been to gather some of these into charts and to show them. And in order to make it clear, because it's all sort of coming under a grand heading called Vedanta, because that's what Vivekananda brought here in 1893 to us. The Vedanta is a very specific and high-minded and noble system. But Vedanta is also a bit beyond the reach of a lot of people, especially its Advaitic aspect, non-dual, how to understand non-duality, like the Shvara. And so in the meantime, in order to qualify ourselves to be able to understand Atman, Brahman, Nirvikalpa, Nirvana, what Buddha called Nirvana, then we have to put together these pieces, sort of like we put together this Om sign with dominoes. See, there are facets of consciousness, and the facets can be divided up, if you want, into two things: tattvas, and that is principles, and deities. Deity is a good word in English because rather than saying Shiva or Vishnu or Thor or borrowing gods and goddesses out of different pantheons from different cultures, we can just say deities. There's a whole set of deities. Of course, in India, it's known for them, plethora of deities, and these all occupy different levels of consciousness, of our own consciousness. They're all inside of us. In other words, is a way of saying. It's a problem to be looking only outward, as we just said. Mundaka Upanishad said, anterior to life and mind is the Atman. That's consciousness. So anterior means before. So before life and mind started, their machinations, their Mayic machinations, you see these projections that are going on all the time in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Before that even happened, there was this one stationary consciousness, the Shvara, which remained the same and which witnessed everything, and was always witnessing everything. And your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep it witnesses, and your birth, life, and death it witnesses. And you've had many births, lives, and deaths, and you've witnessed them all, and you're still here doing it, you see. That's part of the awakening process, is to realize that if you get caught in such things as emptiness and fullness, then you have to look at the void and say, well, the void has a name. That means someone had to see it, someone had to have seen it, and someone gave it a name. So the void cannot be my absolute truth, you see, because I witnessed it. We're going through the Yoga Sutras right now in Patanjali. The latest lesson was sent out yesterday, lesson 98, by the way, for those of you who are counting and catching up, that had to do with the mind being, having a witness to it. That's why it cannot be the ultimate authority of things. So it has a witness, or a sakshibhutam, or an antaryami, an inner ruler to it, is a word that Patanjali used. That's looking on all of its thoughts. It's looking on all of its doings. And its doings are quite fantastic. If you take mind from the 24 cosmic principles here, it's right there, Mahat, the great mind. And if you come down from it, get my own copy of it here, of the 24 cosmic principles. There it is. Then you see everything from Mahat down has to do with intelligence. The ego comes into the picture, and finally the ego splits into three: sattva, rajas, and tamas. That's the three gunas. And from those three, the more conscious side of the picture forms, the cognitive senses and the active senses. You've been through this so many times, but hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling, then speaking, handling, locomotion, procreating, and excreting. That's pretty much a tenfold package of senses that you have in the physical body, in the Bhutakasha, in this realm of space, outer space. Interesting term, outer space. Then on the other side, you see the insentient principles more. The tanmatras, which are audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. And then the five elements themselves: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And I've named them all from subtle to gross. They started out subtle, ether, then air came, a little less subtle. Then fire came, and then air, water, and then earth. Earth is the grossest of them all. So they get more and more dense in particles as they come down, each out of the other. The great sage or rishi who put these together didn't just list them, and the people who meditated on Kapila's system who followed him didn't just memorize the list. They saw how one came out of the other. in succession. Air came out of ether, fire came out of air, water came out of fire, and earth finally came out of water. And you can put that philosophically, but if you even look at it biologically, you can see how it works. See? You're going to have these succession of principles in mind in order to follow them back into an inner source, you see. So this is part and parcel of what's called involution. We're so big in the West on evolution, and it pretty much ends there. See? That's our science. Our religion is big on heaven, earth, and hell. You see, that is the religion of the West at a particular time. And heaven, earth, and hell, you could call them Spandas. You could call them vibrating spheres, you see. But it's very hard to find anything other than them. That is, they're very general categorizations, aren't they? What is heaven? Is it the right hand of my Father? Or is it a whole series of worlds where all sorts of beings exist? Like this world has many worlds in it, many planets. What about the inner world called heaven? Doesn't it have many planets in it, many lokas, many realms, many akashas, many types of space, and many types of beings peopling those spaces? Like outside, like inside, like the macrocosm, like the microcosm. So it has to follow. And we're not following. That's the problem. We balk. We balk at the atomic particle. We won't let go of our death grasp on it because it's giving us all our outer intellectual knowledge, and that's giving us resources, and that's giving us scientific inventions, and those are giving us pleasures, those are giving us so-called security, and whatever, hopefully, peace of mind we can get from those things. But the seers keep telling us it's all ephemeral, it's all illusory, it's all changing, it's all mutable. You can't build your house on sand, and particles are sand. So, in that case then, the introspective person turns and begins to look inside. Turn inside and look at the original, as one song in India says. You've verily worn yourself out pursuing outer phenomena. Now turn instead and look at the original inside of you. Very nicely put. So, if you were to look from the standpoint of physical nature back to the Mahat, then you'd be looking back to this cosmic mind. Now, mind too has three aspects: individual, collective, and cosmic. Vyapti, samasti, vyakti, if you want to put it that way. Samasti and vyapti are individual and collective minds, you see. So we have our individual mind, which sometimes we become convinced by our science that it's a brain. See? But the brain, of course, dies and decays with the body. So if we're not the body, we can't be the brain either. That just follows too. So there must be something in brain that has a deeper connection. See, the brain is just reflecting a few of the properties of the mind. So you're making this introspection then, this involution, then you're going to have to connect these principles like Kapila did, and connect them right on up to your sense of individuality, the individual self, see. And then you're going to find your buddhi, or your intellect, and here you're working in the terms of your individual mind, see. But then there's a collective mind that begins to kick in around that time, you see. And you begin to become aware of other entities inside of you. It's that you couldn't have done this alone, that the whole projection process called sankalpa is a big dream. If you want to know the meaning of the word sankalpa, is kind of a mental projection in time. Kalpanika means an imagining in time. So you're becoming aware that there are other entities that are involved in this projecting process with you, and that's what's congealing it. So you couldn't do it alone. If you were doing it with just individual mind, you'd have your own waking state, your own dreaming state, your own deep sleep state, and you'd be moving back and forth like that, and actually most people are, who are very self-centered, just have their own individual life, and that's pretty much it. They haven't connected to anyone else. Or if they have connected to anyone else, it's to society with its mundane preoccupations. And it doesn't ever go very deep. Whenever there's a deep thinker, he has to go off alone, you see, and he has to begin to make these interconnections, whether they be in science or whether they be in psychology, or whether they be in spiritual psychology like yoga. So there's a kind of Western psychology that is fathered by Freud and Jung and so forth, and has that whole leaning, and it's pretty much limited right now by a one lifetime scenario. But there's a whole yoga psychology that you can follow in the East, which connects you to your other lifetimes, and by doing so begins to suggest to you that there's something that doesn't move, that's stationary when all of this movement is going on top of it, like a dancer that needs a stage, see. So anything that's dancing, whether it be planets in space or people on a dance floor, there has to be a foundation for that that's holding it, and that's your own consciousness. So that's with a capital C. It's immovable and all-pervasive, as we said. So if you're getting close to the Mahat, you're beginning to catch glimpses of something that's very foundational that way. That here you see the Mahat is a vehicle for the soul's consciousness and a medium between nature, between soul and nature. A small portion of it becomes the individual intellect of mankind. So Mahat, if you just take a small portion of it, that would be your intellect, you see. We've all talked about God's mind in recent, when we were young. Maybe when you were in college or so forth, you wanted to impress your friends. You said, but there's also, God has a mind too, so you started thinking about that. Well, they thought much deeper than that. In India, they actually espied God's mind by meditating on it. They actually identified themselves with the Mahat, with the Great. And they found out that they dropped all the lower aspects of their consciousness. They just knocked them down like a set of dominoes and posited themselves at a very high station in consciousness, decided they liked it there and never came back down. See? Now the tendency of most people is to come back down to the body, and that's called ancestors and humans. That's the wheel, Kala chakra, that Buddha wanted to get you off of, is that you were trapped into this emotional wheel. But there's an emotional wheel like that keeps you sentimental, that keeps you attached. See, that it's going around all the time in cycles for hundreds and thousands of years, and repeats itself again when those cycles end and a new cycle begins. That is, the old grand cycle ends and a new grand cycle begins, and this is going on forever. It has to, because there is nothing but eternity and infinity, you see. So there's infinite gods, there's infinite souls, there's infinite people, there's infinite worlds, and there's infinite consciousness. And so there can't be an end to anything, because there was never a beginning to it. So when you're talking about beginnings, middles, and ends, you're talking about these cycles, A, U, and M of Om. See? So the first thing to do would be to connect them. Connect your waking to your dreaming to your deep sleep, and then realize what's doing the connecting, you see, or that which is always connected. That's this underlying foundation for everything. It's the underpinning for the relationship between nature and spirit. Adihi ya samyoga nimitta hetu is a beautiful chant in Sanskrit. Kala trikala dekalo pidristaha. Goes on saying, meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart. Well, the first line right away pretty much puts it into perspective, doesn't it? You didn't say meditate on your own self as something separate from God. Meditate upon the self, on God as thine own self. And then where is it? Somewhere out there? No, it's seated in your heart. So you've got three things right there in the first line that you can do to cement your understanding to the fact that that Maya is always trying to divide things. Consciousness is indivisible. See? Maya is always trying to divide things, but consciousness is indivisible. So meditate upon the Lord as thine own self seated in your heart, and who appears to you as the universe. So here's the word appear, you see. It's how everything out here that you just mentioned in that first sentence is an appearance. See? The universe is appearing to you to remind you of this truth, in other words. Perceive that one as the primal cause of the relationship between consciousness and matter, it goes on to say. Perceive that one, which is your own self seated in your heart, as the primal cause to the relationship between consciousness and matter. That is the underpinning, see. That's the linchpin of all linchpins. That keeps it all together. And all the vibrational spheres will come out of that. See. But that's the indeterminable and interminable foundation for everything. It doesn't change. It cannot be pulled apart. It's united in all ways at all times. Homogeneous. We look for words in English for it, you see. And so that relationship between Purusha and Prakriti would be right there. See, the sentient soul, the self, which would be separate from the Prakriti, insentient nature, called the non-self. What is the sentient souls called the conscious spiritual entity, sometimes called Ishvara, or Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity. Prakriti is called unconscious material energy, unmanifested nature, intangible matter. So there's such a thing in philosophy in India as matter and intangible matter. Manifested nature and unmanifested nature, we're missing that entirely in our thinking, in our science in the West. There is no intangible matter. There's just tangible matter. So we come up against a rock and a hard place there when we try and conduct the affairs that will lead us to an inner life. Christ wanted the fishermen along the river to have an inner life because he saw they had everything external they needed. Wives, loaves, fishes, huts, friends, and a society there, you see. But he said, but you don't have an inner life yet. So they were, even back then, 2,000 years ago, in the Middle East, were between a rock and a hard place with a great seer or savior, again, trying to come and tell them about this movement inside that they needed to make. Well, with just a quick look through these 24 cosmic principles, because it's important, there are other details to it. We see that Shaivism, followers of Lord Shiva, came along later, took Kapil's 24 cosmic principles and added a whole 12 tier on top of them, called Spandas. That's what this class, or the series of 5 classes, is going to be about. I'm going to save the Vedantic and Buddhistic look at those till next week or the week after. And we want to look at Shaivism just in itself first. I'll probably be borrowing from Samkhya because we have to. Samkhya was one of the earliest of philosophies, and Kapila gave us this 24 cosmic principles to base everything on. And as I was about to say, if you had some swamis coming to you from India and giving you the Vedanta, then what was mixed in there that you didn't know about was Samkhya, Buddhism, Shaivism, Yoga, and Tantra, and probably a good admixture of teachings from the Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Vishishta and other non-dual texts like Ashtavakra Samhita and Avaduta Gita. You were getting a mixture of that and didn't know that you were calling it by an overall umbrella Vedanta. But if you wanted to look back into the origin of Vedanta, that would be back to the Vedas, because the Upanishads are Vedanta, but the Upanishads came through 4 movements, the first of them being called Vedas. They pass through rites and rituals. They pass through forest dwelling phase where people renounced the world and went into the forest, and then they finally came out with these Upanishads, which were, fat trimmed off the bone, all the meat of philosophy, and ended up as the great conclusion. That's what's prevalent right now in the form of both Vedanta and Buddhism right now, is giving you these essential teachings of India. But it went through a long, long flux of time and had many stations and steps to it. Shaivism rather recent in some of its teachings. So remember to keep everything I'm saying here in a kind of a context of this idea of vibrating spheres inside of us. That's everything I've been saying, whether it's waking, dreaming, deep sleep, 24 cosmic principles, the Father's kingdoms of heaven within. Any of the things I've been commenting on here, keep it in the context of inner worlds. And remember, I've been saying that there are inner worlds, but there are also beings who are peopling those inner worlds, deities. That's probably one of the clearest ways to put it. Tantra put it that way. Upasana and Atmagyan or Tattvagyan. Tattvagyan means knowledge of principles. You must know that you must have knowledge of these principles in order to have some sort of map to cause you to remember where you came from, how consciousness moved. I mean, it's nonsense, because consciousness doesn't ever move. It dreams. That's about all you can say about it. But it seems like movement to us, especially when it gets out here to a physical world, where we're all different bodies moving around in cars and on airplanes and on foot. See? Trains, planes, and automobiles, as they say. So, but consciousness is the underlying foundation for all that. But to study the tattvas that go with it, you'll come to know more about these spandas, these vibrating spheres inside, and you'll know that the vibration gets finer and finer as you move deeper and deeper towards the Father of the mansion, or towards that one who sits in heaven, and Jesus would be sitting on the right-hand side of the Father and so forth. However you want to put it metaphorically, you can do so, but basically you have to know that there's this whole series of worlds, spandas, vibrating spheres. That's the whole word there. And then the side of it that has to do with deities is called upasana, meditation on deities. You're supposed to have darshan. You're supposed to have communion with these deities. And those deities have manifested themselves in part as your fathers, your mothers, your grandfathers, your children, and other souls. In part, they've manifested themselves as that with your help, your sankalpic process, you see. So the ancestors in the lower spheres, that is the spandas, the lower spandas, we'll take a look at them, are constantly in communion with the human beings, and back and forth they go. If the connections are broken or lost between the ancestors and human beings, then you have a country that has no belief in ancestors. Does it sound familiar? Because you're in one right now, you see. Very, very little knowledge going on or any connection of a philosophical kind or a cosmological kind between you and your ancestors. They're dead, they're gone, see, kind of idea. But you still feel them. Yes, what you're feeling is just a memory. Yes, but what is a memory? A memory in Sanskrit called smriti is an incredibly powerful thing. It's coming from a memory of reality. Your memory right now in your brain is in relativity, but it has a deep connection inward to reality. You have a memory of being pure light inside of you. You have a memory of being absolutely blissful inside of you. You have a memory of knowing everything inside of you. All-knowing, see. You have a memory of being all-seeing, omniscient, omnipresent, being everywhere at the same time. This is your true nature you're talking about. And if connections have been broken or memories have been tampered with and too much time has passed and Dharma has been forgotten, then it's time for a Ramakrishna Paramahamsa to come back and tell you again, through his chief disciple, Swami Vivekananda, that you need to wake up and remember this. So a teaching of the 36 Spandas is going to go right to the heart of that if you can follow it. See? The whole process is incredibly complex. This is making it less complex. See? And this is already complex for you. See? So this is why we have to take it apart step by step and look at it over years. I started teaching this system early on, back in SRV's inception in 1986. And then onwards into 1990s, we looked at these different ways of understanding the inner terrain of our consciousness, of our own consciousness. Imagine, we have this vast inner terrain and we don't know about it. It's like owning acres of forest and never knowing that you owned them. See, you're infinitely rich, but you're considering yourself to be a pauper, see, with nothing. So this whole inner terrain has to be opened up. There are songs they sing about it in India, about awakening to this richness of your inner heritage and so forth. And your ancestors are going to be a part of that. Well, if we want to use the rest of the time in the first half, because I've spent some time in a kind of an overlay of some of this using Samkhya's beginning, we can look quickly at this, because it's, again, not going to take a lot of time, because you see here at the bottom, here's mind, might as well call it Mahat. There's Chitta, there's Buddhi, and there's Ahamkara. These are these right here. In the old system, minus Chitta, but in Chitta was put in as thought, see, as the many thoughts of all these living beings in all these different realms. Thought power is, and Chitta is an incredibly intense instrument for congealing things, for creating worlds. It all comes out of a thought. So Chitta had to be added in there. So that's the fourfold mind right there, and it's a fourfold part of your individual mind. Then it has a collective level to it, and then it has a cosmic level to it too. So that's Antaha Karana. That's a beautiful word. Antaha means inner, Karana means cause. So they called it like it was way back in the oldest times. The mind is the cause of all the worlds. Not nature. Nature couldn't do it by itself. Not God, because God is not a creator. Sorry. In this tradition, in these traditions, they know Paramashiva, Brahman, Mahakali, Mahavishnu don't create. They don't preserve and they don't destroy. There's no beginning, middle, and end in them. It's like the Shvara of Om. You see, it just always stands. It stands alone when everything else is gone. It's immutable. So you can't then bring God into that dream process. Vivekananda put it nicely. He said, to think that consciousness dreams is ridiculous. Consciousness never dreams. You are in Maya and you're dreaming with the power of Maya, you see. So you're going to have to wake up from this dream in an ever-awake state. Yogic insomnia, let's call it that. See? And I've seen people in yogic insomnia. My teacher was one of them. Even when his body slept, his mind was wide open, awake, all the time. So he sees outer and he sees inner. He's seeing both ways, not just outer. If you see only outer, you get tired and you have to go to sleep. And you don't remember anything beyond the outer, because your mind is caught up in outer, right? Everything is outward. And there's nothing inward, and that's the predicament of having no spiritual life. That's the predicament of being a fisherman along the river, depending on the river and fish and husbands and wives and huts for your security. But when all of that's wiped away by a flood or by death, whatever is heading your way, karmically speaking, individually and collectively, then you haven't shored yourself up with knowledge of the eternal self within you, that's birthless and deathless and timeless, that doesn't need food, that never gets thirsty, that doesn't have any desire. It's already completely fulfilled. Shiva is called Aptakama. All his kamas, desires, have been fulfilled. He's completely free of desire and living in a state of absolute contentment and bliss all the time. So that's like yogic insomnia. See? You're dwelling in one state of consciousness all the time. So from there on down, you see what comes is the same thing over here. So just to make it simple for you, there's the pancha gyanendriyas. Those are the five cognitive senses. Those are seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling. Then you have the five active senses, locomotion, procreation, and so forth. Then you have the five tanmatras, which are right there: audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. And then you have the pancha mahabhutas: air, earth, fire, water, and ether. Those are the old terms for them. Prithivi is earth, Jala is water, Agni is fire, Marut is air, and Vyoma is ether. So you see, if you heard the old peace chants like Om Shantihi, Apaha Shantihi, and so forth, Prithivi Shantihi, so you'll know that they wanted to bring peace to the earth and peace to waters and peace to fire and so forth. In fact, they were seeing peace as its underlying foundation because they connected air, earth, fire, water, and ether to the tanmatras. See, one set of five came out of the other. In other words, fire was a thought first, and then it turned into the actual fire on earth. But you're just thinking about prehistoric man finding his first fire from a long Mayic evolutionary process that went on for 4,320,000,000 years, and finally some intelligence came into the picture. But they're thinking all the time about consciousness and peace being the very foundation of the five elements, being the very foundation of your five senses. You don't see just because there's an eye there. There's a power in the eye to see, and that's conscious. See? So that's why these are sattvic. See, mind and five senses are more sattvic. They have more consciousness in them. The senses have a power to perceive, to cognize. That's why they call them cognitive senses. Again, meditating on that would bring more consciousness to them. So you'd have these connections to them more. So you can see that from there on down is pretty much from here on down, that Shaivism accepted point blank everything that Kapila put in its 24 cosmic principles. And Purusha and Prakriti were also there. So there's Purusha, and that would be the gate into the higher Spandas of Shaivism, 12 of them. Now, that's where it gets more abstruse for us, because we're not used to thinking that there are inner worlds. Outer world is all there is. So I can think about mind. I might even be able to think about God's mind if I extend myself a little bit. If I'm not atheist or materialist, but I think there might be something to this consciousness theory, as they say, then I could probably think of some great controller, some inner controller, divine, that's hooking together the experiences of all people, see, and it's there and operating the processes of birth, life, death, like Yama, the god of death, transitioning someone to the next level. That's going to be one of these inner deities. If you don't know Yama, if you're afraid of Yama, then you're not going to have a very good exit from the body into your next lifetime, you see, or into the next spanda. You're going to have to go through death and see death and talk to death, meditate on death, and know that he's a deity, that he's a god inside of this pantheon of gods that helps people transition from physical to subtle, and helps also, in the reverse fact, bring people out of the ancestor realm back into the fetus. That's a principle there. If you don't want to call him a god, then call him a power. But he's real. See? Real in the sense of his role inside of the whole cosmic process. See? Now, it's a huge task, but over the next 4 classes I want to try and point out other systems in accord with this and show you where they fall. I mean, some of the systems just put it very succinctly in terms of 1 or 2 divisions, like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. But you're going to have to look at waking, dreaming, and deep sleep and know that when consciousness passes from waking to dreaming, you're passing with incredible speed through a whole series of levels of consciousness. And you're seeing just a few of them, you see. You're catching a glimpse of a few beings. You might even have a vision of a seer or a god, or have darshan and forget it, or remember part of it when you come back. Consciousness is moving so quickly out of the waking state into dream and into deep sleep that it's passing through all these spandas. See, faster than the speed of sound is the speed of light. It's faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought. And then faster than the speed of thought is the speed of consciousness as it shifts from spanda to spanda. Vibrational spheres. You see, all it needs to do is change its vibration and it's in another world. Change its vibration a little more, it's in another world. You see, and it can do this naturally with great ease. What it can't do is be conscious of everything it's doing. Take your day, your 24-hour day. See, are you conscious of everything you're doing all the time? Well, it's an ideal that we kind of hold, isn't it? Well, I want to be conscious of my whole day. Every moment I want to be fully conscious. You see, it's kind of a yogic ideal people talk about. But then you get into just an hour and you feel how many times you fall out of consciousness in that hour. You were driving along, oh, where'd my mind go? You see, it's sort of like a meditation. Well, I'm going to have a great meditation today. 10 minutes later you say, wait a minute, I forgot to be meditating, you see. So, like outer, same as inner. You see, everything moves at incredible speed and you can't, you cannot be aware of all the movements. So meditation cuts time down. Meditation helps slow things down so you can see them. So now you want to meditate, as Gaudapada is telling you, on your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep connection. You want to actually slow down those movements and go into your dream state consciously. Is it any different than going into your 24-hour day consciously? You want to see it all. See? You want to become the seer. You want to perceive it all and take account of it, because that whole acreage is yours, you see. Those acres and acres of prime, pristine land that you just walked through came out of you, and you're not caretaking them, you see, in a conscious way. You're not aware of them. So maybe getting a little bit too long-winded about that, but it helps to explain how, as you move through these levels of consciousness, it's this Purusha that's the open gate. It's an ancient word. Really it means, if you want to take it apart, Purusha really means indweller in the city of 9 gates. So you have 9 apertures in your body, you see. And consciousness is operating those and experience things through them. Ears, eyes, mouth, nose. So it's having these experiences through these 9 gates, but it's the indweller. So the reason they came up with a great word like that, Purusha, was not only to contrast it to Prakriti, because Prakriti was its servant, you see. But later on, as Patanjali said, now the seer has become a slave to the seen. See? The Purusha fell from its original position and it became identified with all this. And it didn't know that it created everything in Prakriti. It became unawares. And it got into fetuses and wombs and went back and forth from ancestors to humans, and maybe into animal wombs and plant wombs and insect wombs. Who knows? Consciousness shifted in and out of all those things, and it forgot its orientation. And it didn't know that the whole thing was going on inside of itself, its great self. And this is why Vivekananda told us once, there's no God, there's no devil, there's just the great self. See? He was like very Buddhist in that way. See? Kind of knock down people's kind of wobbly domino-like castles of thought around a personal God. Personal God's fine. You'll find him in these spheres. You'll find lots of personal gods inside of you. Like Yama, the god of death. You should get to know him. And the god of light and the goddess of wealth and so forth and so on. Yes, they're all there inside of you. But you've forgotten them. Or you've alienated yourself from them. Or them from you. Everyone wants to be in good graces, right, with your ancestors. Ancestors want to be in good graces with the celestials. Celestials want to be in good graces with the gods and goddesses. And the gods and goddesses with the overseer, the Trinity, you see. So these are all Spandas. So you could put 5 basic Spandas there, or 5 Akashas, like 5 Russian dolls, all held inside of each other, you see, and then spilling back out. Inside of those 5 Russian dolls are tens and thousands of beings. And not just the human beings, see. So if you forgot your connections to your ancestors, and ancestors to the celestials to the gods and goddesses, the deities, and the deities to the Trinity, then none of this will probably make any sense to you. You'll think it's all speculation. But then, do you have a better idea, as they say? See, can you tell me in a better way what inner life is like, or are you just telling me that inner life doesn't exist, flat out? That you're just a rank materialist? See? So I'm sorry some of us won't go there. It just doesn't make any sense. Your random theories are not bringing us any peace. See? And not bringing any sense to this whole conglomeration of worlds. See? I mean, even out here, there's a conglomeration of worlds. It's a whole worlds I can get into, you see. Music, you see, right outside of me, and I'm quite often getting distracted by those, you see. But what if I were to take that same scenario that I'm studying everything out here and just flip it, you see, switch it around, and then find myself inside my dreams, inside levels of consciousness, and begin inspecting them, and then come out into my waking state with a memory of those, smriti, see, and then we can start conversing about them. And I can then rebuild my connections with the ancestors and with the celestials and so forth, with my guardian angel, if you want to put it that way, see, my protectors, those who are protecting me, those who are looking after me. Because Krishna says in the Gita, this world is not for the person who doesn't sacrifice to them, your protectors. So if this world isn't, then any other world you go to is not going to be for you either. You're going to be a thief in both worlds, taking but not giving. So this is some of the rankest kind of karma to get into, is forgetting your connection with these protectors inside of you, these deities, these gods and goddesses, not paying them no never mind. See, it's not wise. And you're just hanging out in this outer periphery enjoying yourself. How long do you think that's going to last? Before one of these comes to you as a Hitler, one of these comes to you as a Attila the Hun, one of these comes to you as a Saddam Hussein. You see, in any given country, in any given time, with any given agenda on their mind, just to run riot over a whole culture. So, you weren't aware of these movements of these beings, benign and malicious, in and out of consciousness? You didn't protect yourself with your protectors by sacrifice, by worship, by knowledge. Krishna says in the Gita, this is the highest kind of sacrifice, knowledge sacrifice. You cannot get any higher than this. If you can get this and give it to others, he says, then you're my child. You're mine. You see, you belong to Krishna. He'll take care of you forever. So knowledge sacrifice is the highest. So this is tattva gyan. This is learning of certain principles. These have been left behind. Some of them are millennia old. Yes, I give it to you. It's ancient wisdom, but it's eternal wisdom. That's the thing. And if you have to learn a new language, get an idea, gain some inspiration from a teacher, and begin to put your mind on these things, if that's what you have to do to get enlightened, then you got a better idea. See? Are you engaged in a better idea out there? Or why are you here in class listening to this? You see? Did it ring of truth? And isn't that truth eternal? And isn't it inside of you? Otherwise, why would you have gotten attracted to it? So, there are a lot of people blowing hot air out there. The Dharma teacher's not one of them. He's blowing cooling air at you, you see. Let's cool everything down here, you see. Mm-hmm. Let's put everything into perspective, and let's open up some channels that you can run along consciously. You're doing it every night in dream anyway. Now how about adding some deities in there to contact, or giving you a map so that you know where you are inside of any given run of consciousness that might happen, any kind of flight of the mind, flight of fancy in your dreams. You think Dalai Lama doesn't have, he came out 14 times to be incarnated, doesn't have those worlds perfectly in order, that he can always go back to Tibet, you see, and go back to his Buddha nature and come back out again. He has those channels run well, like a good explorer into a forest. See, he has those trails, he knows where they lead and which one branches is where, and who's along each one of them. He wants to go and see his old teacher, see, Trungpa Rinpoche, then he'll go along that trail, see, and have communion with him. It doesn't matter if he's in the body or not, because he's eternal principle, you see. Deities don't die. You don't die, actually, either. So, and you are a deity. See how many people will come flocking to you when you become aware of this, you see. So, this is all by way of preamble, but we have been taking some specific tattvas. In between all these tattvas, just imagine thousands of deities, beings, conscious beings, peopling. You look at these, just a word. What's in a mind? What's in your thought? See, is that just an individual thought and mind, or is it a collective mind and thought? If you think collective, all of a sudden you've got billions of peoples involved in that collective mind, haven't you? And how much power for thought there is there. And then you'll be able to make some sense out of how this all got projected and how it can so easily go away in deep sleep. Poof. Or at death. Poof. Or in samadhi. Poof, poof. See? Gone for good. Even the idea of it gone. See? In the seedless state. Asampragyata, they call it. Or nirbija. Or nirvikalpa, where there's no kalpas and no time left anymore. Where all the divisions that we're talking about here have been removed. It's just one flow of consciousness, one ocean of consciousness. The mind stream has been dissolved. See? All channels have been taken back. It's just all the borders have disappeared. It's like a flood, see, Ramakrishna used to say. There's a water tank here, water tank there, water tank here. You see, people are going to them to get water and bathe and stuff. Then a flood comes. Mm-hmm. You see, covers them all up. What good are the water tanks? See? He used to say, if you wanted to go from one point to another, you'd take this winding road, you see. Miles and miles, you see. But when a flood comes, you just take a boat and go there in a mile, mm-hmm. See. So that's what it's like to have this consciousness be all cohesive, all homogeneous. See? And that's to be meditated upon until you can transcend all the Spandas and merge yourself in what Shaivism would call Paramashiva or Paramashakti. So that is a first half introduction plus a good start into some of these systems, 24 cosmic principles, 36 cosmic principles with the 12 Spandas. After the break, then, we will look at some of these, take a closer look at the 12 Spandas that are transcendent of Purusha and Prakriti, and how Shaivism talked about inner worlds in their subdivisions. And very powerful places, again, peopled with thousands of beings. And I even have a chart on those beings, how what they call them there in Shaivism. The Vidyas, the Videshvaras, the Mantreshvaras, and so forth, where they fall, and what they know, how enlightened they are inside of these higher worlds of Spandas, they're called. So it's a very nicely outlined system. It gives us a good roadmap that we might start exploring some of that ourselves inside, within us, the kingdoms of heaven within. So here, let's end for our break and return in 10 or 15 minutes.